Welcome to Crop Talk, brought to you by Innovative Ag Services, and this is our Field Scouting Special. Each week from March through October, our agronomy team shares timely, boots-on-the-ground updates from across the IAS geography, so you can make confident decisions as the seasons change. Today, you'll hear a quick regional update from our IAS agronomists, including what we're seeing in the fields right now, what to keep an eye on next, and a few practical scouting reminders you can put to work this week. I am your host, Nicholas Giesman, and this week's focus is going to be on burndowns, pre-herbicides, and getting timing application down for both of those passes. I'm going to send it over to Nick and Ellsworth with a safety update.
Thanks, Nicholas. I'm Nick Thompson from the Southwest region, covering Story County, Hardin County, and Hamilton County. For the safety update this week, we're going to follow along with the theme of pre's and burndowns. Make sure you're reading the chemical labels, have your SDS sheets with you at all times, wearing your PPE, including gloves and smocks. And when you're not spraying in this rainy times, it's a good time to do whatever preventative maintenance that you can before the season starts, including changing the oil in your tractors, the air filters, and making sure you hit every grease zerk on your planter. It's very important that in these slow periods while we have the rain that we do these preventative maintenance measures as so that during the busy times you're not left standing around waiting for these to get done. This would also be a good time for you to get in touch with your local agronomist and go over the plans that you have for planting and what order you think you're planning on planting your fields in. This information can give your agronomist a better idea of when and how frequently to dispatch your fields for spraying. For the scouting report here in the Southwest region, soil temperatures have been increasing at a great rate this past week, even with the rain. Once the ground is dried, I believe we'll probably see planters head into the fields, and whatever anhydrous or fertilizer that hasn't been put on will begin to be put on again. The ground temperature has been on average above 50 degrees, which is that magic number for all corn growers. And Alden had the lowest that I tested at 48 degrees, while Ellsworth, Radcliffe, and Jewell all tested between 50 and 53 degrees. We're starting to see some weeds poking through as we walk, but I wouldn't say anything has really taken off. We've stayed below that pop can size, and they should be pretty easy to kill. Now I'll send it over to Owen in our Northwest region.
Thanks, Nick. This is Owen Heatland from the Cleves location, covering Grundy, Hardin, Franklin, and Butler counties. For the update for this area, nothing has changed really over the last week. We continue to be wet. While we have warmed some, it appears that we're going to continue to stay wet for probably the next 7 to 10 days. Most ammonia and dry is done. Very little to no planting is done. The biggest touch points or lookouts are making sure that we're dry enough as we move farther in the season for planting. I know as well as everybody else that we'll be rushed when we get to the point to plant, but make sure we aren't causing any sidewall compaction or seeding issues as we go along the year. As far as weeds go, we are starting to see some more emergence of warmer season weeds besides like a ragweed or a cocklebur, and we will touch a little bit more on that and burn down later on in the podcast. So next, I will kick it over to Aaron.
Thank you, Owen. I'm Aaron Recker out of the Masonville location. I cover Buchanan, Delaware, and parts of Fayette and Clayton County. The last couple of days have left most of the area wet with getting about 1 to 2 inches of rain, with more to follow this week, which will keep guys out of the field for a couple more days. With that being said, we are about 90% done of our anhydrous and fertilizer application. So once things dry back up, we will get rolling on that again to get those acres covered. The rain has allowed farmers to catch up on repairs and getting things ready for planting season. Now is the time to be getting those liquid nitrogen and seeding recs put together and having a plan on where you want to start, along with making sure you have your pre-application set and if any kind of burn down is needing to be added. Here we are getting chemicals and seed shipped out to our growers. We have also gotten a good start on getting tanks out to guys for liquid fertilizer, along with getting some 32% and thioa loads to the guys who have storage on the farm. Looking ahead, we have some nice weather coming with warmer temperatures. With crop insurance planting dates already here, farmers will be eager to get out in the field and start planting. I know we've talked about this in past episodes, but just make sure your soil conditions are where you need them to be before planting to avoid causing any issues down the road. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Adriana in our Southeast region.
Thank you, Erin. I'm Adriana Herlash, Southeast region, mainly focusing in Jones County. Key points this week, just want to touch base, chemical and seed being delivered. If you haven't gotten it yet and you're curious if we've got it ready, just go ahead and give your local agronomist a shout. You can always schedule a pickup or delivery, whatever works best with you. If you're curious about any treatments, we can still make that happen. You just have to let us know. Another key point, burn downs starting to pick up here. I know it's been a little wet. I've already had a couple guys reach out. They got rye or alfalfa, whatever the case may be. Let your local agronomist know, and we're gonna try to get out there as soon as it is fit. Warm and wet weather is optimal for the growth of weeds. May want to start considering, making your pre-pass more of a burn down, depending on the weed pressure. We'll be out as much as we can trying to check those fields, seeing what we're seeing, and letting you know so we can make any adjustments that we may see fit. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and kick it back to Nicholas.
Thank you, Adriana, for that update. As the temperatures start increasing and we get more weeds emerging and it's closer to planting, there's times where we might be adding in a herbicide with our burn down or increasing the rate of our burn down. I'm going to send it over to Owen. He's going to kind of give us his thoughts on increasing rates and adjusting adjuvants and maybe adding herbicides with a pass. Owen, what do you got for us?
As we start to look at herbicide applications, burn down, pre-emerge applications, we want to really look at a couple things. So first off would probably be burn down in general. So as we stay warmer and wetter, we will continue to see weeds get bigger and different species of weeds start to emerge. So if we start with beans, we really want to make sure if we're doing burn down in beans that we're adding the appropriate growth regulator product, whether that be 2,4-D in an enlist bean or a dicamba in an extend flex bean. And as the season goes on, we may start to see some grass emerge, which would cause us to add a Roundup to the mix. So when we do any of those things, we want to make sure, number one, we have enough water for coverage and we have the right adjuvant package to work with those products and with whatever we're using as a pre-product. Usually you would see an AMS brace product and then some sort of oil to help with the burner product. Now, as we move into corn, there's not as much no-till over here on the west side, but I know there is on the east side. You would look to add maybe a Roundup or a dicamba product based on what weeds you are seeing out in the field. And again, then making sure you're adding the right adjuvants into your products to enhance them. Because as we continue to stay warm, we'll start to see those cocklebur, ragweed, early season grasses continue to take off before we can get in the field. So we'll have to continually adjust rates. And that's something that you really need to talk to your agronomist about and figure out what fields you're going to plant first, what you're going to plant last, what you're going to work, what you're not going to work. And then you can come up with a game plan as the year goes on and change it if necessary. Nick, over there on the east side, what products would you think you would see or want to add, or what weeds would be your biggest issue?
I know, kind of like you said already, we're giant rags popping up. We're seeing some cockburr. I know grasses are just getting started as it warms up here. We're looking at a lot of stuff that was just a 2,4-D or maybe a dicamba mix going out there. We're going to have to start spiking some Roundup in, which means adding AMS to get the right adjuvant loads in there. I know one thing I'm talking about with some growers is they had a burn down pass planned just to do the kill. And now as we get really close to our planting window approaching, insurance dates are here. We're talking about adding in some pre's, some residual products to make sure we're helping keep the weeds away as we get closer to planting. Are you seeing a lot of that on the west side, or are you helping growers, navigate through those decisions?
Yes, we definitely are. We're to the point here where when we dry out, planters will run and we'll probably combine the two passes together. The other couple watch outs I'd like to hit on is depending on what pre you have will depend on what product you put with it. So that's a great conversation point for you and your agronomist to discuss. And then the other thing is, as we add Roundup to the mix, we really need to look at, are we using 32 or thiosulfate as a carrier? And if so, how much? And will that affect how our Roundup works? Do we need to add water? Do we need to do other things? So all of those things need to be considered for that field. And then just weed specifics. Everybody knows that different weeds grow in different fields. And so if we maybe need to tweak our plan and add something to this field, but not to this field, your agronomist will continue to look and see what you need to add, but anything you can do to help them out make that plan will work better for the both of you.
That is like that. When we talk about weeds and different species, let's also talk about weed size. If we were going out there 2 weeks ago, stuff was just coming up. You're talking 1 to 2 inch weeds. Some of these fields, you're starting to see some 3 to 5 inch weeds pop up. That really dictates the rate and the coverage that you're going to need to get that kill.
Absolutely. As weeds continue to grow, it's very important that if we're doing a burn down, we use enough product to make sure those weeds are killed. Because the worst thing that you can do is injure the weed, and then they'll just be ragweed, especially. I'm sure once it's injured, it's almost impossible to kill. So making sure we're upping those rates before the crop emerges to make sure those weeds are killed, so we start clean and then we can stay clean. Is there any other questions on weeds or points that somebody wants to jump in and say?
With the weather that we're having and the heavy rains, would that impact what residual you would choose to put down? Would you go to a residual that could stay in the soil a little longer and deal with more rain, or would you not be looking at that right now?
Usually the products that we use for pre-emerge are usually based a little bit more towards heavy rain, and then your residual for your second pass is based a little bit towards light rain. I always like to tell guys that when you try and outguess Mother Nature, usually it doesn't work. So stick with your plan, and any residual is obviously better than none. So I think as long as you're putting a residual out there with your burn down pass, it's probably the best thing you can as you get rain moving forward.
That's awesome. Thanks for that information, Owen. As we look for next week, we're going to have a guest on, and we're going to be talking about soil sampling and some precision ag talk. That's all for this week's Crop Talk by IAS. Thanks for tuning in. If any of our listeners have questions, feel free to email them to croptalk@innovativeag.com. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss next week's update. And if you know a fellow grower who'd value a quick field snapshot, share this episode with them. For more agronomy resources and to connect with your local IAS team, visit innovativeag.com and follow Innovative Ag Services on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We'll catch you next week on Crop Talk.